The most important part of ESPN's proposed A.J. Brown trade wasn't A.J. Brown. It wasn't his production, it wasn't his frustration, it wasn't even the price, it was which pick Cleveland would give up, because buried inside that single detail is something the Browns have quietly done before, and when teams repeat the same decision pattern, especially at this stage, it usually means something else is already decided, they just haven't said it yet on paper.
So the mock trade that was cooked up by Jeremy Fowler, ESPN insider, says the Browns would receive A.J. Brown in exchange for that second first-round pick that Cleveland has, pick 24. Perhaps a bit of a steep price for Brown, but there's no doubt about his talent. Here is the explanation Jeremy Fowler gave on this deal and why it makes sense. The Browns have 2 first-round picks, 6 and 24, after the Travis Hunter trade in April of 2025. They could use number 6 on an offensive lineman and then send 24 to the Eagles in exchange for Brown. This would immediately upgrade new head coach Todd Monken's offense, giving the passing game a fighting chance alongside an already stout defense. Cleveland's wide receiver room totaled just 1,467 receiving yards in 2025. That was worst in the NFL.
The proposal feels simple. Cleveland receives A.J. Brown. Philadelphia receives Cleveland's second first round. Pick number 24 overall, not pick 6, pick 24th at. Distinction matters more than it looks, because pick 6 is where teams build. Their future pick 24 is where teams protect their present, and ESPN's proposal doesn't suggest Cleveland is choosing between A.J. Brown and a wide receiver prospect. It suggests Cleveland already knows what pick 6 is. Fourth assumption inside the proposal is quiet but clear. Pick 6 would be used on offensive line. Help pick 24 would be converted into a J. Brown, which means Cleveland wouldn't be choosing between development and certainty. They'd be choosing certainty, twice a veteran receiver, and immediate offensive line protection. Both moves designed to stabilize something quickly, not gradually. Quick stabilization usually doesn't happen randomly. It happens when something inside the organization has already shifted timeline, because if Cleveland believed their offensive rebuild would take multiple years, the logic would lean toward younger, cheaper, longer-term assets. Instead, this proposal assumes Cleveland would willingly exchange long-term control for immediate stability, and that assumption only makes sense if Cleveland sees their offensive uncertainty as urgent, not theoretical urgent. But urgency inside NFL organizations rarely announces itself directly. It shows up in how optional decisions suddenly feel necessary, and here, ESPN didn't propose Cleveland using pick 6 in the trade. They proposed using pick 24, which quietly protects Cleveland's original priority and reveals what they're unwilling to risk. This wouldn't be a new behavior, it would be a continuation, because Cleveland has already shown repeatedly how they solve wide receiver instability. They don't usually wait for the draft to fix it, they trade for certainty. Jarvis Landry arrived through trade. Odell Beckham Jr. arrived through trade. Amari Cooper arrived through trade. Jerry Jeudy arrived through trade. Different years, different circumstances, same solution pattern. And when organizations repeat solutions instead of evolving them, it usually means something behind the scenes keeps producing the same type of problem. Drafting receivers requires patience. Trading for receivers removes patience from the equation. It replaces projection with verification. It replaces uncertainty with known outcomes, but it also reveals something else: discomfort with development timelines, especially at wide receiver, where Cleveland's internal draft results haven't stabilized the position. Long-term players like Cedric Tillman, David Bell, Anthony Schwartz, and others never fully secured the role Cleveland needed them to, which means every few seasons, Cleveland returns to the same place, looking outward, not inward. And ESPN's proposal doesn't introduce a new idea. It simply assumes Cleveland will do what Cleveland has already shown comfort doing: convert draft capital into immediate clarity, because draft picks represent possibility, veterans represent resolution, and resolution becomes more valuable when uncertainty exists somewhere else in the offense, especially when offensive leadership itself is newly established. New head coach, new offensive structure, new expectations. Those transitions rarely invite patience, they invite insulation, veteran insulation, which makes A.J. Brown less about adding talent and more about eliminating variables. But eliminating variables always comes with trade-offs. that don't fully appear until later. The most overlooked part of this entire proposal isn't emotional, it's mathematical, because Cleveland's financial exposure to A.J. Brown wouldn't actually be permanent. They could absorb his contract now and still exit relatively cleanly later depending on how they structure the deal. Cleveland could take on manageable cap impact in the short term, while preserving flexibility in future seasons, which quietly transforms the trade from a long-term commitment into something closer to a controlled evaluation window that changes. The psychological risk, because Cleveland wouldn't be locked into A.J. Brown indefinitely. They be buying optional certainty, not permanent certainty. That distinction matters. It means this wouldn't just be about acquiring a wide receiver, it would be about controlling offensive stability during a specific period of transition, and that timing aligns with something else: A.J. Brown's own frustration, his public comments, his visible dissatisfaction with his role, his acknowledgement that his situation in Philadelphia felt difficult. Frustration like that doesn't always force trades, but it introduces possibility, and possibility creates leverage, not just for teams acquiring the player, but for teams evaluating their own timeline honestly, because adding a player like A.J. Brown only makes sense if Cleveland believes their offense is close enough to benefit from immediate stabilization, not distant enough to wait. But Cleveland hasn't publicly declared which timeline they're operating on, which leaves the proposal sitting in a strange place, not confirmed, not denied, just structurally plausible, which is often where the most revealing decisions begin, because trades like this rarely signal the start of something new. They signal the acceleration of something already happening quietly behind the scenes. The proposal itself may never happen, but the logic behind it already exists. The willingness to exchange long-term flexibility for short-term stability, the willingness to repeat familiar solutions, the willingness to reduce uncertainty, even temporarily, because sometimes the most important part of a proposed move isn't whether it happens, that's what it reveals about how a team sees itself in right now. Cleveland hasn't told anyone which version of their future they believe in, but decisions like this tend to answer that question before words ever do.